Concepts, Values and Wise Advice from the Billy Meier Context compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Choleric temperament.
Contact Report 849.
The following must be explained with regard to choleric human beings. If I am to say anything further, namely, choleric comes from the ancient Greek word chol, which translated means bile, which is why choleric people are said to have bile rising up in them, although no human being is an actual choleric or a man, for women can also be choleric and radical. At the same time, choleric fits can have very different forms and causes, although in many cases, it is only a matter of trivialities. A choleric human being can not only steal a lot of energy and joy from fellow human beings, or in a relationship, and even create enmity, especially also on his or her own side, because cholerics can be very resentful. At the beginning of a friendship, acquaintance, or close relationship, choleric negative outbursts do not usually occur right away because, interestingly enough, outbursts of anger are held back deliberately so that they do not seem very noticeable or not noticeable at all. Choleric people are often very charismatic persons and know exactly how to present themselves to others so they can make a strong impression on them. Only gradually do they allow their choleric fits to become noticeable, especially when it comes to love and partnerships, because then cholerics can hold back their cholerism at first, but then gradually and suddenly lose control of their own feelings unexpectedly quickly and openly bring their choleric nature to the fore, often with suppression, hostility, violence, with torture, beatings, and blows. In a close relationship, in a marriage, etc., this can not only become an unbearable burden, but can even lead to murder and manslaughter. Something that is proven time and again and is more widespread than the public assumes, because those who suffer harm, who are truly victims of such choleric fits of their partners, and mostly women, remain silent. They allow themselves to be abused, often for the sake of their children, or because they are afraid of everything becoming known, or because death threats and the like fearfully prevent them from coming out to real friends or to the police, etc., and seeking advice and help. Already in childhood, for example, injuries, such as those caused by the wrong behavior of parents or other caregivers as well as the environment, may have led to choleric behavior, which has shaped the behavior in adulthood in a choleric manner. Therefore, if emotions in a situation become more violent than would be appropriate and correspond to decency, correctness, and justice, then this is very often due to long past experiences and injuries, which are remembered subconsciously and trigger emotions, which often lead to a reaction with surging anger, without the choleric human being knowing why he or she reacts in such a manner. Cholerics suffer from attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity disorder. Cholerics, both female and male, fly into a rage very quickly and uncontrollably, especially and above all through unpleasant experiences, when they fall into frustration, which happens very often and is triggered when they are rightly, or wrongly, met with opposition. Anger produces physical reactions and discomfort in them, which brings stress, which release all kinds of hormones, such as adrenaline, cortisone, and noradrenaline, as well as testosterone. These are released in increased and abundant amounts. In the whole process, the blood pressure will also rise and the heart rate will increase. The choleric human being is also vindictive, although many of both sexes are embarrassed by their anger shortly after their tantrums, so they may superficially entertain the idea of an apology, but usually forget it again. But when they jump the fence and actually apologize, the apologies are, or seem somehow hollow and empty, because there is no change in the choleric behavior and the outbursts of anger. Consequently, nothing is learned from it, which makes the choleric traits even more pronounced as they grow older. As a result, it is not uncommon for the choleric person to exacerbate the stresses and strains on other persons in the immediate environment. This is the case when the active choleric behavior learned at a young age cannot be broken down again, whereby the prerequisite for breaking down is that the choleric human being becomes aware of his or her wrong behavior and also consciously works on breaking down his or her temper until it dissolves into happiness. Cholerics of both sexes suffer from an attention deficit, that is to say, a hyperactivity disorder, as well as psychic disorders, but also unconsciously from anxiety states and subconsciously anchored feelings of neglect. Certain forms of autism, etc., can also lead to choleric fits of rage, but cholerics of all types are generally quick-tempered, very unbalanced, and hot-tempered. Typical cholerics tend to have sudden and very violent and completely unprovoked outbursts of anger, uncontrollably and in a matter of seconds, that is to say from 0 to 100 within 1 or 2 seconds. Such human beings give free rein to their aggression and rage and, in an uncontrolled state, do not shy away from violence or even murder and manslaughter. If you look at the way choleric people of both sexes work, they unfortunately appear quite unprofessional, unsympathetic, and uninterested, because the choleric always breaks through and comes to the fore. In daily life and from a safe distance, choleric outbursts can be quite entertaining, that is to say amusing or even refreshing and exciting. But those who have to endure cholerics day after day will probably only find them unbearable. Especially at work, a choleric human being can massively disturb and even ruin the peace. Effectively, a definition of the choleric human being can be created. For example, if you are looking for a definition of the term, you can imagine a passionate, irascible, and irritable human being, and thereby recognize a human being with a choleric disposition, whereby it is best to bear in mind that a choleric human being has typical bad qualities and characteristics, such as inappropriate words and behavior, dominant and opinionated behavior, loud and violent choleric tendencies, flying off the handle over trifles, easy excitability, sudden, unprovoked, violent, uncontrollable, loud outbursts of rage, very little self-control over one's own feelings, frequent and rapid outbursts, excessive, impulsivity, uncontrollable violence, intransigence, bossiness, very quick irritability, small things cause strong emotions, impulsiveness is constantly exaggerated, dominating behavior, readiness to use violence and uncontrollable use of violence, imbalance, resentful for a long time, irascible, unbalanced, quick-tempered. On the contrary, good and valuable qualities are found in choleric human beings, such as the following: passionateness, dynamic, self-initiated, motivated willingness to perform, strong-willed desire. These good and valuable qualities can serve for a leader, such as for presiding over a work group, etc. However, it is always to be taken into account that it remains a fact that a choleric human being constantly gives free rein to his or her irascibility and rage, and thus loses all sense of decency. This is either because the choleric human being simply takes the right to do so, or the employees are effectively incapable and unable to defend themselves and to bring the choleric, angry manager to his or her senses. Interestingly, it is to be said that there are huge differences among cholerics, because not in every situation or environment, as well as not in every action, etc., do cholerics react equally quickly in a negative manner in irritation. Unfortunately, many human beings behave tyrannically towards their fellow human beings, just as men or women behave tyrannically towards their partners, especially in many open and closed relationships and marriages. While they pretend to be peace-loving in their jobs because they want to keep them and not lose them, or because they are cowardly and playfully hide their true tyrannical nature, playing Liebmensch and infallible. But there is also the reverse, namely that at work choleric and unscrupulous self-expression takes place. But at home lamb-like behavior is cultivated, perhaps out of fear of one's partner or for other reasons. The choleric behavior of human beings is a characteristic of the personality and, moreover, is not gender-determined, for both men and women can be more or less addicted to choleric behavior. Very often, irascibility and feelings of inferiority are responsible for the choleric trigger, or otherwise an acute dissatisfaction, burnout, excessive demands, stress, etc. There would be a lot more to say about this, but a final point must be made somewhere, because there is still something else to be explained about cholerics, namely, If the human being learns the characteristics and traits that are peculiar to a choleric human being, then they can adjust to them accordingly and deal with them in the correct manner. Above all, it is important to ensure that the choleric human being is not put under pressure and is given his or her freedom, as well as not being specially controlled, because independence is highly valued in choleric people. Nevertheless, it is necessary to show a choleric human being that one has one's own limits, which he or she also has to respect and keep, just as it is also necessary not to shy away from a confrontation with the choleric person, but to be strictly careful not to appropriate the process of his or her behavior for oneself. A choleric human being likes to receive recognition for his or her achievements, which is why it should be granted to him or her, just as it should also be granted to every other and non-choleric human being. Furthermore, it is appropriate to trust and give responsibility to the choleric person as well, for he or she can be consistently task-oriented and responsible and a good leader. The choleric person can also have very good skills that can be trusted. It is appropriate in any case to give the choleric human being some understanding, especially when he or she is at 100 and somehow helpless and even powerless against it in their irascibility and rage, because deep in their memory, something is going on which they can neither elicit nor control. For this reason alone, it is necessary to offer them understanding and support to come down. In order to deal with a choleric human being in a correct wise, it is very helpful to calm the human being down, because calming down always has a positive effect. A choleric human being can also get help, because there is also the so-called mindfulness and commitment therapy, which may be suitable for some choleric people to learn how to deal better with their temper and fits of rage. Those affected learn to recognize, perceive, and consciously counteract their feelings that trigger anger and temper, and to learn self-control. However, therapy can only be really effective for cholerics of both sexes if there is a conscious desire to work on oneself effectively and to change one's personal behavior. Trying to force this on the choleric person through a third party is, on the one hand, very exhausting and usually not successful. On the contrary, it is a reason for the choleric person to go berserk. There are medicines to counteract choleric aggressiveness, which often occurs, but these may only be prescribed after very precise medical clarification. However, these medicines only apply to individual cases and can only serve to calm the person down. What is also important to mention is that, as a rule, exceptions are also the rule. Cholerics consciously suffer from their attacks and want to help themselves, and there are also various methods of really helping oneself and being able to reduce the irascibility and outbursts of rage. The first step to help oneself is the most important one, namely to take the path to self-knowledge, which means to build up sufficient self-reflection, that is to say, to question and analyze one's own thinking, feeling, and acting in order to recognize one's own problems and to change them for the better. However, this should be done without brooding, which uselessly robs energy. This is the only way to be able to classify one's own behavior. It is advisable to talk about this with other human beings, preferably with a designated reference person. It is necessary to observe the outbursts of temper and the tantrums closely, and to determine how they manifest themselves, and in which situations, whereby it is also important to determine how they differ when they occur. Notes can be made on this to memorize anything that may be helpful in consciously counteracting a choleric episode and avoiding or preventing a correspondingly embarrassing situation. If active stress occurs, then it should be considered which method should be used and is suitable to reduce it. A lot of exercise and walking and breathing fresh air can help, as well as meditation or breathing exercises can actively and effectively help to reduce negative feelings and stress, which can prevent a fit of temper and a tantrum from occurring in the first place. Finally, it should be said that psychotherapy can be useful and helpful if a really competent psychologically trained psychotherapist can be found to help. But this is not easy, because really knowledgeable persons of this profession are rare. Only special methods of behavioral therapy are effective and suitable for necessarily learning to deal better with personal emotions.